This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio, without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. Well, we said that the Orlando Magic were going to come out and give their best shot in Game 3. Hopefully that is their best shot, as the Cavs have suffered their largest margin of defeat in franchise history as far as playoff games go. Joining me today to discuss this and how the Cavs can turn things around in Game 4 is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I didn't hear no bell. Woo! Yeesh.
I mean, we said after Game 2, to our credit, we said that there is a very good chance that Orlando is still capable of bringing this back to Cleveland 2-2. They were the fifth best team at home in terms of net rating and 18th on the road. This is, kind of one of those hallmarks of a young team, is that they do play a whole lot better at home versus the road. But I think even understanding that Orlando is going to give the best shot that they were able to throw in this game, you would have wanted more from the Cleveland Cavaliers. We saw them respond to Orlando throwing punches when they were at home, right? There were several times where the Cavs, weathered the storm of Orlando making a run, and the Cavs got it back to a comfortable margin of defeat. And tonight, the Cavs started out pretty well. Gave up a few too many offensive rebounds, but started out getting that 7-point lead and just did not keep their composure. They did not respond when Orlando started throwing haymakers in return.
Yeah, I don't really, I think I've seen a couple people point to those offensive boards to start the game as some sort of, bellwether for what was to come. I don't really agree. I think there were some weird bounces on some bad misses early on, and obviously it's better to be first to the ball, but I feel like they lost this game at the end of the first quarter, the beginning of the second quarter, where, I think they gave up 9 first quarter offensive rebounds.
That's correct.
And only gave up
14 total for the game. Yeah.
Yeah. And only gave up 5 the rest of the way. I just, I don't know if it's that as much as just they let Orlando completely dictate the terms of engagement. A couple things. I guess this pod can be just we can talk a little bit about just the things that disappointed us. I think that's going to be kind of part of breaking down the worst playoff loss in franchise history. I was disappointed that so quickly into that second quarter, we just kind of went away. It was working so well for us on defense. They were hitting some shots and we weren't. And, we immediately downshifted into the smallest lineups and the worst defensive lineups we've played all series. It felt like a very quick departure from, from what was working for us, even earlier in this game. And I just felt like a very much of a, oh man, we got to put Merrill in because we can't shoot. And it's like,
And then Merrill struggled to get open, as we've seen in some of these previous matchups.
They got beat up a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously, I think where we should actually start is the first adjustment that was made, which was that the Orlando Magic made a change to their starting lineup. Wendell Carter Jr. was out there rather than Jonathan Isaac. And I thought that was an interesting and somewhat expected adjustment. The Cavs no longer had that kind of spot where you just could blatantly cheat off of on the defensive end of the floor.
And Jonathan Isaac went 2 of 4 from 3 today.
Right. But you would live with that if he's out there with the starting lineup, because when he was out there, the Cavs were able to cheat off of him, and that really helped them, jam the cutters, to take away those passing lanes, to take away kind of those bread and butter momentum plays that the Orlando Magic have. And without that, you kind of had to play them a little more honestly. on the defensive end of the floor. And I agree with your conclusion and where it eventually got to, which was, whether it was overreacting to the offensive rebounds, whether it was overreacting to Orlando starting to hit some outside shots. I thought they lost their composure on the defensive end of the floor, and there was a little bit too much overhelping. There was a little bit too much scrambling. Some of those mistakes that we've seen on defense since the All-Star break kind of reared their ugly head. And even though on this podcast, I don't think we actually made an official prediction, but we did make one when we were on the guests on the Garage Beers podcast, which, I said that I'm picking the Cavs in 6 rather than 5 because I just don't believe in the consistency of this team, or at least I haven't seen the consistency. This is a team that was capable of going out there and winning in 5, but because we've seen
and still is for what it's worth.
Right. But because we've seen these type of swings where strengths can become weaknesses, that's been the biggest question coming into the playoffs is, are they able to perform at a consistent enough level? Because, when you lose the second chance points battle, you lose the fast break battle, you lose the battle points off of turnovers, the offensive rebound battle, all 4 of those areas, we know the Cavs are capable of winning every single one of those factors in every single one of those categories because we've seen it. But this is really this is the beauty of basketball. When you're not talking about such a dramatic talent discrepancy, it comes down to execution and whether or not you're able to do that at a consistent level. And right now, the answer for Game 3 was a pretty resounding no. They weren't able to put their foot on the Magic's throat and really take command of this series.
Yeah. And I think, that kind of does take me to what I'm a little disappointed by. And, you wonder, you come out and play so well these first 2 games. Like, the offense isn't hitting, but like you very correctly noted that, they just hit 2 more threes against Orlando in Game 2, and they have a really good offensive rating. Right. When you're playing a slower possession game, sometimes that can, those per 100 possession stats can be a little misleading, yeah. or you can't pull, you don't want to pull the wrong things. I felt like the Cavs process was at least okay in games 1 and 2. And their defense was so locked in, so focused, so smothering, so consistent, where even when Orlando would punch them in the mouth, they would kind of, stagger back, regroup, and come back and ready to lock them down. And you hoped that this was a kind of indicative of a level of focus that they were kind of locking into, and maybe the last month or so of the season was more a byproduct of, hey, we're just ready for the postseason, we're tired, we're worn out. And I think the thing that was so jarring about the last month and a half of the season was how the team was letting go of the rope. This was a team that kind of won our hearts by not quitting on games, by not getting blown out, by no matter how ugly the first 3 quarters had been, getting it within 10 and all of a sudden getting it within 6 or 5 or 4. And so much of the end of the year was them just, again, letting go of the rope, playing that game of tug of war and just, and it's, and it's just over, and you can't even consider getting it back. That's what this game was. That's what a lot of their big losses were at the end of the regular season were. And that is a concern to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern. You talk about the offensive process and, us coming into this game saying, well, those shots are going to fall and whatnot. I still believe in that, but the important thing to remember is that the playoffs are still a small sample. And, when you have a 3-game trend here where they're just not hitting these outside shots, it's reaching the point where I do have some concerns. It's reaching the point where, hey, the people that have more information in terms of what everybody's going through and what is and isn't working well, you kind of have to figure out a way to get some easier buckets and to generate offense, because, the fact that they're able to get open looks, just not able to knock them down, you don't want to get away from that entirely, but you want to be able to at least raise your offensive floor with some other action, some other thing that you feel confident in as a team, that you're going to be able to generate enough points to at least, sustain a viable offense. Because you're right. Like when you're playing 95 possession games and you go like 8 of 34 from 3 like they did tonight, yeah, hitting like even just 32% is going to wildly swing your offensive rating. But I still like I was always critical of like those Rockets teams that said, well, yeah, we missed 27 straight threes, but it's variance. It's going to correct itself in time. Basketball is such a momentum game, right? Like you can gain confidence. You have to kind of get those touches. You build off of your successes within games. And that's how you can see like that's why by nature it is a game of runs. And I just feel like they're not doing enough to kind of consistently spark those runs on the offensive end of the floor.
Yeah, and this is, I will say, I do think the general, I mean, tonight, nothing looked good. I don't think a single player on the Cavs had a good game except maybe Jared Allen in the first quarter.
I would say Jared, and before you launch into this, I just wanted, because you said it earlier, and I think, we should kind of single him out. When you're talking about us hoping that, hey, it was just guys tired and whatnot, I think Jared Allen was the perfect example of that, where I was a little disappointed about how he was finishing the season, and I feel like we've gotten 3 solid games out of him. Everybody else, I was not thrilled with their performances tonight.
No, no one plays well tonight, but I do think it feels different on offense than it did against New York, where even though Orlando has better defensive personnel, even though the Cavs' offensive rating is certainly worse this year than last year, after tonight, they were just a little bit worse year over year through 2 games, and that number is definitely in the crapper after this one. But I've liked their process more. I felt like the Cavs couldn't even generate decent looks to miss last year. So I am seeing that growth. But, like, to your point, it's just concerning because, again, Orlando has this great defensive personnel that make things hard on you, and Strus is 2 of 14 from 3 so far this postseason. George Niang is 1 of 10. Donovan Mitchell is 6 of 24. It's great that they're up 2-1 with those splits, but, like, if they don't flip, I think my biggest concern is that you're just going to have to win this game on the defense, or the series on the defensive end of the floor, because I don't think Darius can get loose against this team.
No,
not this version of him. He had 5 points on 2 of 10 shooting tonight. He has salvaged his line late in games 1 and 2, when the line wasn't looking so good.
Yep.
The 3-point shooting's been okay because of that 4 of 7 game in game 2, but he
just hasn't been effective.
Darius hasn't been, like, if you're generating good looks but it's just, they're not going, it's like, okay, well, at least you're gonna look to you're gonna look for those guards to generate, be the ones to hit the tougher looks. And you look on the other side of the aisle, and Paolo hit 8 absolutely outrageous shots today. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this version of Darius is capable of that, and Donovan with a stacked defense and Jalen Suggs on him, I'm not sure if Donovan's capable of that. And so I just, I think against a different matchup, the offense has a chance of ungunking a little bit. Mm-hmm. But right now it does feel like their best road to consistently, not bad offense is hoping and praying for those shots to start going in, and that's a bit of a scary proposition.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. I think at times they found something really going at Paolo. Like, Karras had a lot of success going at Paolo.
Karras gets a little credit. I know the game was slipping away, so it's hard, but he was attacked. He was the only, and this is where you have to throw a little shade at Darius and Donovan, because Karras was the only one who was identifying when a Magic defender was flat-footed and exploding past them in this game.
Yeah, and I think sometimes offense can be part of your defense where, try to put Paolo in as many actions as possible and try to use that as, your easiest route to getting to the basket. I think that's something that they're definitely going to have to do in game 4, especially if Wendell Carter Jr. is out there, who isn't a slouch defensively, but there is a gap in terms of what he can provide as a rim protector compared to Jonathan Isaac. I think trying to get Paolo in actions and trying to get those rim attacks and win the points in the paint has to be part of the equation. And you're right. Like this is just going to be a tough series for the guards. I think, when you had a lot of trepidation coming into this series, that was your concern. It's, hey, Darius isn't healthy. Hey, Donovan isn't healthy. And this is the best point of attack defense, maybe the best point of attack defender in the league. They can throw Fultz at you. They can throw a lot of really great point of attack defenders at you. Yeah, that's absolutely part of the concern, but I think we have seen that they are able to generate offense against this team, even without those shots falling. There are routes to getting back to that. It's just about whether or not they can execute consistently. And I think, part of why I wasn't sitting there pounding my chest going, hey, it's going to be a sweep and whatnot when we were up 4-0 or when we were up 2-0, I should say, is because these are parts of the ebbs and flows of a playoff series. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. The Cavs absolutely smoked the Knicks in game 2, and it ended up not really meaning a whole lot. You can even look back in Cavs history, right? We lost this one by 38. The previous largest margin of defeat was by 36. It was a first-round series against the Washington Wizards in 2008. Cavs were up 2-0 going into that game. They had won game 2 by 30 points, and they got smoked by 36 points by that Washington team. Cleveland went out and they won game 4. They lost game 5 back in Cleveland and then closed it out in 6. That was a team with LeBron James. That was a team that had already been to the NBA Finals, and that still happened to them, right? This is the type of thing that can happen in a playoff series, and it's about not getting too high and not getting too low. But
this is a low, and I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Right, and I was going to say that, the concerning thing is because we haven't seen consistency and we have seen, some of these backslide spiral into, longer slumps. It's something that the Cavs have to treat with a very high level of urgency, because we know that this can spiral. This can easily turn into a 7-game series if they don't come out with the necessary focus to, take control of the series once again.
Yeah. And I really just think it is so much about this is playing with a belief system and committing to that belief system wholesale. And I just don't think the Cavs did that tonight. 121 points to this Magic team is, and it's important to note, Orlando still didn't shoot well from 3. They shot 35%.
Yeah.
They waltzed to the rim on a lot of these possessions. The Cavs gave up a ton of pick sixes on the offensive end. I don't know. I don't have points on turnovers up right now.
Orlando had 19.
I can't believe it's not more, to be honest, because I felt like every turnover was a pick six in this game. And again, there was just a lot of, I watched the Dunker Spot did a playback rewatch of game 2, and just in Orlando, I'll tell you this much, leaving that game, I was like, Orlando's leaving a lot of meat on the bone. I'll tell you, if you are a fan of that Dunker Spot preview pod, highly recommend you check out that channel, because watching a live game with a former NBA coach in Steve Jones, you learn a lot. And there was a lot of stuff where Orlando was just not making contact on their screens, setting screens way too high, chasing Cavs screens out to half court, going over for no reason. A lot of meat on the bone stuff that I think that, I think sometimes when a series is going well, you look at these macro trends and these macro levers, like starting Wendell Carter Jr., and we're like, okay, that's an adjustment they might make. And watching that playback video where Steve's pointing out all the things that Orlando's doing wrong on offense, you kind of just remember a lot of it is just play better, play smarter, set picks at this angle, not this angle. And I think Orlando did a lot of that stuff, but I don't want to go too far in giving them credit because the Cavs defense was just so soft.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a game when I go back and rewatch this game where a lot of those same kind of things are going to be things that I'll find, right? Like, not setting the proper screens, not, bringing the kind of physicality that we saw in games 1 and 2, not, missing those connections on the screens, missing those connections when you're boxing out and putting a body on guys, just the kind of drop connections that we never get from Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, I gotta say, when it comes to Paolo Banchero, both of us are very high on Paolo. I think we really like what he can do as a player, and I think this was the kind of game that we were worried about coming in. This was, him going off from the mid-range. Yes, he splashed in some threes, but he was hitting some wild shots. This was kind of the type of performance that draws those Carmelo Anthony comps when it comes to him. And, first of all, you got to credit him because he's a special player that had a special game, first home playoff game, and he really rose to the moment. And then the other part of it is I just don't think that this was as impactful of a performance defensively from Evan Mobley as we've seen in the past. Mobley has done a phenomenal job on Paolo, making him uncomfortable and, impacting the shot before the shot even goes up by disrupting the dribble and, not letting him be in that groove. And I just did not feel Evan Mobley in this game.
No, I didn't either. And then, and even when you wanted to feel him, Paolo was hitting some pretty high degree of difficulty shots. And then
those were definitely mixed in, without a doubt.
But I think Paolo took over this game when the Cavs only had one big on the floor because they downshifted so fast. There was some Max Strus at the 4 or Niang and Merrill on the floor. And then Orlando, I think to their credit, did a great job of pushing. They pushed so much better in this game in terms of off misses, turnovers, whatever it may be. They were getting into their offense and they were attacking weaknesses before the Cavs defense was able to get set. And because the Cavs were also playing smaller in that second quarter, a set Cavs defense was just less painful to go against. But
less imposing for sure.
There's just such a difference between even George Niang guarding Paolo with 15 seconds left on the shot clock on the left wing with 3 other Cavaliers with feet in the paint and Evan Mobley or Jared Allen behind them and Isaac Okoro ready to mess up any screening action. Than, Strus on Paolo and Sam Merrill's the guy with the foot in the lane instead of Okoro and there's 22 seconds left on the shot clock and he's at a full sprint. It's just such a difference. It's just such a difference in execution, even though, and it's not like Niang, you look at the numbers and I've been surprised that Paolo's numbers are on Niang have been better than what it looked like to my eyes when I see those splits. But it really felt untenable today because of the way that Orlando was attacking and the way the Cavs were structured on the floor.
Yeah, and I think because they downshifted, it also turned it into a more up-tempo game. You did a good job highlighting before this game that Cavs Magic is actually the highest-paced playoff series so far. It
would still be the slowest pace in the league.
It would be the slowest pace in the regular season.
It's a muddy postseason, gang.
It's been a very, very muddy postseason. But I think, the Cavs downshifting allowed Orlando to play with more pace. I think that was an adjustment that they were going to have coming into this game no matter what. But when the Cavs are less physically imposing, you're not going to run into as much resistance. You're able to, continue to get downhill. And that makes things more difficult for George Niang defensively, right? I think he has competed well on the defensive end of the floor, but once you start getting into that up tempo and it's attacking in space and it's not a set defense where the help is available, all of a sudden that becomes a whole lot more difficult, right? His best possessions defensively on Paolo were half court defense, it's set, the ball rotated to Paolo, and he's using his body physically. This type of up and down game where, Jared Allen's just, getting back into position and you don't have a lot of other length around you. That's a really, really tough ask. And, that's the type of situation where, either you make the adjustment of going to a Marcus Morris, who's going to give you a little bit more length defensively and a little bit more toughness, or you have to find another way to keep Orlando in the half court.
Yeah, and I don't think Morris's minutes were crazy good tonight either. So I think you might have hoped if the Niang slump was going to continue, that the Morris minutes felt really good. They didn't really feel that good, to be honest. And again, this is where it just
honestly, it's going to come down to sorry to cut you off, but I think consistently throughout this year, we've highlighted the difference guys like Max Strus has made, George Niang since the All-Star break. They have found the way to impact the game beyond what they were just brought in to do, which was add 3-point shooting and spacing. We need that thing that they were brought in to do right now. We need them to hit shots. We need Max Strus to start finding it from three. We need George Niang to start hitting from three. We need Donovan to start hitting from three, right? We need our best shooters to get those shots up and start converting them. And, Darius has to play a whole lot better as well. I share your concern that we've talked about, hey, is this going to be a lost season with everything that he's been dealing with? I thought he was actually moving around a little bit better physically, and it was nice to see him start off with a quick 5 points, but those were his only points of the night, right? He's going to need to, pull a little bit more, I think, from three, but I'm a little discouraged with what we've seen from him this series.
Yeah, he's got 2 free throw attempts in 3 games. He handles the ball a lot and is being guarded by a very physical defender. It's just not gonna be good enough. I think we're probably the 2 biggest Darius Garland fans in Cavs media. And it's just, it just kind of does feel like, again, they just need something to click on the offensive end of the ball. But that's why I kind of just keep going back to here's the thing, Justin. Things weren't clicking on the offensive side of the ball the first 2 games of the series.
No.
They were just playing elite defense. And yeah, Orlando was giving it up a little bit. They weren't playing their best offense, and you have to be ready
and we
for.
We beat them on the boards, right? We beat them in second chance points. We beat them in points off a turnover. We beat them in points of the paint. You can't lose all those categories, right?
No.
And I think that stuff is easier to turn around. It is a make or miss league, and it's the least interesting thing to talk about when it comes to 3-point shooting. Of hey, they just gotta make shots, and that's really important. That is such a big part of this, but you have to focus on what aspects of this you can control, which is continue to generate those open looks, but you have to make sure that you're not losing on the boards. You're not losing off of turnovers. You're not losing in the paint. Control those areas that aren't as dependent on variance, and that's going to give you a better chance to weather the storm when it comes to, the lulls that come with shooting.
Yep. They were awful tonight. I think they would tell you that.
Yeah. Well, Jared said the same thing.
Yeah.
He's Jared said, this isn't a game that we just want to sit here and be like, oh, it's one game. Let's kind of forget about it. He's like, we don't want to forget about it. We want to use this as fuel. We feel frustrated and disappointed in our effort in a lot of areas of this game, and we need to use this for game 4. That's, again, this is part of all playoff experience is good experience, whether it's good or bad. If you're using it the right way, it can be used to your benefit. And they have to draw on the experience from last year of, hey, when we had our great game, that didn't last. New York came out and they punched us in the mouth, and our inexperience and our inability to be consistent showed once again. It's just, from a fan standpoint, it's, all right, that's a nice thing to say, and that's a nice thing to want to have happen. But when you yourselves haven't shown that level of consistency, it's a real big test.
Yeah, man. And again, this is where that letting go of the rope thing is such a disappointment. I forget who was saying it in our Discord, but or it might have even been Ziggy on Twitter, but like, Boston goes down, Miami goes down big to Boston in game 1, but they're able to keep their starters in because it's still close in, or their main rotation in, because the game is at least close enough to where they at least have to keep trying to figure some things out, if not for that game, but for game 2. And guess what? Game 2, they came out with a great plan. By the mid-third quarter, we were playing Tristan and Merrill and Morris, and I think that's the disappointing thing too, is the game got so freaking out of hand we couldn't even learn anything.
Yeah.
Or
even if you kept your starters out there, like Orlando's going to be playing a bunch of bench guys. You're not.
Yeah, it got so out of hand.
Minutes.
You have to keep it within like. It's going to sound passive aggressive, but you have to keep it within like 25 in the mid-third quarter to even get actionable data, So like, and then you have, and I'll tell you what, Justin, this 1:00 tip, you don't even have a full, 2 day, you don't even have a full 48 hours between games. It's just, it's like 36.
Yeah. Hey, that's the benefit of resting early, I guess. No, you're right. It is definitely, it's disappointing to not, be able to build off the way that they closed the second quarter, even, right? Like the fact that they were able to bring it down to 16, you chip away at that and you get it down to 8 at the end of the third quarter. All of a sudden, Orlando's starting to sit there and being like, man, we've let them back in this. We've blown the lead that we had. They weren't able to pull that off. And now you have to wonder, does a win like this dominant of a win give Orlando kind of that momentum and confidence to really extend this series, right? Like, are they able to win game 4 and then game 5 is an absolute dogfight, right? Like, that's 100% on the table. Like this, I said it after game 2. Orlando was not at the top of the Eastern Conference standings by accident all season. Like, this is a very good team, even though they have their deficiencies offensively. This is a team that's beat Boston. This is a team that beats Milwaukee. This is a team that has given a lot of the top teams a real challenge despite their deficiencies, because of how big they are and how well they defend and their ability to turn, create turnovers. And that's part of why I like this as a challenge for the Cavs. We need to be challenged. We need to find ways to be more consistent and to execute in those areas. If we don't, you have to deal with the consequences of those actions, right? And the thing about a playoff series is it is a small sample. You don't get a lot of opportunities to turn this around and correct things. So you got to come out and almost treat game 4 like it's a must win. You want to regain control of the series and, get Orlando back into a headspace of not being as confident in what they have going on.
Yeah. And just, again, less about Orlando and more just to prove to yourself, like, no, that game is an aberration. If they come out, take care of business in game 4, take care of business in game 5, then we won't be thrilled that this game happened, but it's a bit of it's a little different.
Memories are short in the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, but you see how much goodwill is left after this game. Like, honestly, like, people are going to ride the roller coaster of the playoffs, and I can't necessarily blame them.
I mean, I think we've ridden it a little bit over the course of this podcast, where I wasn't saying all this stuff about all my concerns after they went up 2-0, but I think there is a degree of the roller coaster ride happening here. But like, listen, you take the worst loss in franchise history in the postseason, you do kind of have to take your angst medicine. No one's going to trust you right off of a 38-point loss that you just completely let go of the rope. So you hope that they're pissed in the locker room. You hope that they're like, they know that that their mistakes were made and that they come out in game 4 and just, completely change the tone. But like, I think that's the other thing that must be said is you now have to take the tone of the series back.
Yeah.
You had the tone. You had them beaten down, frustrated, searching for answers. And now, not only did they take game 3, they destroyed in game 3. Mm-hmm. So that's a team who maybe their confidence was shaken. Now they're like, screw this, we're better than this Cavs team. That I guarantee you that's being said in the Magic locker room tonight is, we weren't ourselves. This is who we are. So you have to, you're not going back into the series after a 38-point loss at a net neutral. You're coming in at a confidence deficit all of a sudden. And now you have to reassert control of the series. And that's hard work. And that's why it's bad to lose by 38 points.
Yeah, a real hot take there, Carter.
I know.
You're totally right. And one of the things we talked about was the best teams and the teams that are, already at the level that we are trying to get at, in terms of where the Cavs want to be. They bend a series to their will, right? Like the games are going to take on the complexion of their identity as a team, right? And when you see a battle between the two best teams in the league, usually that's the tug of war, right? Which games which games take on our identity, which teams take on the identity of our opponent. And the Cavs, as you said, they have to get back to that level. They have to get back to dictating the terms of engagement when it comes to the series. And honestly, from our standpoint, they have to get, when we look at game 4, which I should probably mention, we are going to be podcasting after every game during these playoffs. So you will hear a lot more of us, hopefully. But after game 4, they need to give us something to talk about more than, hey, they need to play better, because so much of what happened tonight comes down to execution. And hey, this is just a team that needs to play better. We know that they are capable of doing the things that they need to do. They need to go out and do it.
Absolutely, man. Rough game, and a disappointing one, to say the least. But, luckily or unluckily, I guess, depending on how game 4 goes, it's a short turnaround. I was going to say,
at least it's a short turnaround. Our memories can be short. Hopefully we get something a little more positive to talk about. And we're going back to Cleveland with an opportunity to close out this series. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.